Bubba, A Stream of Consciousness, Volume 1, Episode 23, Marker. Well, it's been a few days since I've put up a video. I've been kind of struggling about what to talk about, not because I don't have a lot to say, but in the context of, how I'm trying to reach an audience and, the idea that, I'm making these videos for myself, but if I truly want to go to another level with this venture, that I need to start making videos for the viewers and not for myself. And so that's, a new idea for me, a new concept for me, insofar as that I've been struggling about, what to talk about, where to go with this. And most of my engagement has come from Trump ranting videos or political ranting videos. I guess it's one thing, they say when you're trying to make YouTube videos, pick a lane and stay in it and, stick to something that you have a lot of knowledge about. Well, I have a lot of knowledge about history. I have a lot of knowledge about politics. I have a lot of knowledge about, the social condition of this country, the inherent racism of this country. And I know it sounds, a little weird, awkward coming from a white male talking about racism, but, let's just lay it out there. First and foremost, we're all racist and prejudiced in our own ways. Every person is. It's a distinctly human condition. So for anybody to sit and say that they're not racist or they're not prejudiced or they're so enlightened or whatever, they're full of shit, because everybody is. Everybody has a prejudice in some way, shape, or form. And so the trick is not to, one, you want to be aware of it. You want to be aware and you want to understand that this is inside of you. But the other thing is, to try to figure out what are the conditions that are happening in your life that make you, react in a certain way, where you feel as if that, it's completely okay for you to express yourself. Now, let's backtrack a little bit. Let's go back to 2012 or whatever, back when Trump was on The Apprentice, when he was first kind of starting out with his little political experiment. And his thing was the Obama birther thing, right? He wasn't really a U.S. citizen and his birth certificate was faked and all of this stuff. And so that's the genesis for the MAGA movement in general, is the idea that Obama wasn't legitimate as a president. And I have a theory about that. Of course I do. So I'm going to try to say this in a way so that I don't get too far off the reservation, okay? But living around a lot of MAGAites, you have to learn how to kind of manage their kind of racist tendencies or their prejudice tendencies, because especially when they find out where you're from originally. If they find out I'm from California, then they have really no problem digging in on a guy like Obama or whatever, because they automatically assume that I'm like a true believer and an acolyte for this guy. While I did vote for him twice, and I do think he's a decent human being, by no means do I think he's some godlike, deity, political deity that, was some transformative person in American politics. He was transformative, but it was strictly because of his race. And in 2008, I remember watching him, pass Hillary during the primary process and then completely bury John McCain, who was a very decent candidate, to be honest with you. And I rethink my vote on that a lot every day, not because I feel like I shouldn't have voted for Obama, but because living in California, living in the Bay Area at the time, I disregarded McCain just because he was a Republican. And maybe it was a backlash to 2 terms of George W. Bush and, the war on terror and Dick Cheney and all that. Maybe it was just, we don't need another Republican. But looking back, I think I didn't make a rational political choice. I kind of, was caught up in the tidal wave of Obama. And, like anybody else, when he came out at Hyde Park and after, the election had been called for him and he gave that magnificent speech, and, at that moment, I think that was the last time I felt like, really like, this country had a future and something to be proud of. And you know, after the fact, I started traveling by coincidence, but you know, around the world, specifically to Europe mostly. So in 2009, 2010, went to Europe back-to-back years. 2012 went to Canada. 2013 went to South America. And to a person, when you would talk to other people, they would be like, wow, you guys got it right. We really like Obama, you know. Thank God America got it right this time, you know. And so it like made you feel good, you know, that other countries, after what, you know, we had kind of foisted upon them in the Middle East and all that, that they were appreciative and they approved of our political choice. But coming full circle on this with Donald Trump, you know, he really tried to tap into some of the, you know, deep-seated and darker issues with this country. And I think that most people don't realize that America was founded on racism. I mean, in the Constitution, it says that slaves are considered 3/5 of a man, of a person, of a human. That, and don't get me wrong, guys like Washington and Jefferson, they were men of their times, but they were slave owners, right? They owned giant plantations and had slaves. And whether or not they were altruistic or benevolent with their slaves, you know, you can't change what it is. So the country is founded on basically racist principles. We fought a war over it, the Civil War, probably still to this day. You know, now after living, I don't want to say I've lived in the Deep South, but I've lived in North Carolina, I've lived in Florida, I've lived in a completely other place besides California. And the cultural values are different down here. Insofar as, you know, there are people that still are riding with the Confederacy. And you'd be driving around in North Carolina and, you know, more on some of the back highways, not on the major, you know, not on like 77 or 85 or whatever, but on some of the smaller state highways. And it is nothing to see people that have giant Confederate flags on their property that you can see from the roadway. Okay. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so they call it, they'll have a picture of the stars and bars and it says heritage, not hate. Okay. I don't know if that's true, but it's a good catchy slogan to kind of shield, you know, their appreciation and their love of Southern culture, of the South, of the Southern movement, you know, the lost cause, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, in a modern kind of 21st century setting. But this is where I kind of get a little squirrely with people. And that's because most people, especially, it's specific to the MAGA movement, and it's, you know, the Republican movement in general, the right-wing movement in general, that, you know, racism is an accepted part of the game. And so I get a kick out of talking to some people. And what I will say to them is, you know, we'll be talking about politics or some shit, and, you know, they'll bring up something about Obama, and they'll say, oh, Obama this or Obama that. And I'll say, you know what? You know, Obama was probably the greatest Republican president since Ronald Reagan. And people, they would just be like, what? What are you talking about? Obama is a Democrat. He is not a Republican. What, are you stupid? And you're like, no. Just hear me out, okay? So yes, Obama was elected in 2008. He was elected in a landslide. And if I remember correctly, I know that the Democrats got the House, and I think they got the Senate too. They basically controlled all the levers of government. In that first 2 years, Obama, his signature, you know, plan, his signature legislation, the Obamacare, right? I forget, the American ACA Act, right? The Affordability Care Act. And, you know, these right-wingers lost their mind when they, you know, rammed that through in 2010. I don't want to say they rammed it through. They controlled the branches of government. And I know that the Republican at the committee level, had a say in helping to write this legislation, although less so because they were not the party in power. And, God forbid that the richest, most powerful country in the world try to pass an overarching national health care bill. God forbid. They start howling socialism and communism like they even know what the fuck that means. If you're collecting a social security check, you're collecting from a socialist program. If you've ever collected disability or you've ever collected unemployment, you're collecting from a socialist program. Any government-run program for the greater good, SNAP, whatever, is a socialist program by its definition because it's state-sponsored, it's state-funded, it's state-directed. So if you're going to start throwing those terms out like Marxism and communism, know what the fuck you're talking about, first of all. Again, and I've said this before, this is intrinsic to the American low IQ voter. All right. So they pass Obamacare. Okay. It's not a perfect plan. I think that's what everybody can agree is that there is no one-size-fits-all plan to fix or to address this issue. But here's where it gets funny, because Obamacare is a version of Romney Care, as in Mitt Romney, the former Republican governor of the state of Massachusetts. And that was a plan that they passed back in 1994. And they've been, running it ever since. That plan was actually a version of a congressional committee plan that was posited by the Republican Party during the end of Ronald Reagan's presidency. So if you go back to the genesis of Obamacare, it's actually a Republican-sponsored and authored plan that then was, changed and updated and moved around and whatever. But the genesis of it is a right-wing thing. Most of these morons have no idea that, right? And you go, well, okay, they ram that down your throat. How dare they? How dare the federal government try to help your mother or your grandmother, with Medicare reform so that they can afford the drugs and stuff that keep them alive. How dare they? Shows you how idiotic these people are. Then 2010 rolls around, midterm election. And as what always happens is once it goes one way, then it goes the other way. And the Republicans took back the House and they took back, I think, the Senate. And then that's when Mitch McConnell got up in front of everybody, Scarecrow Mitch, and then gloated about how Obama would get no other major legislation through because they were going to kill it all. And that's what they did for the next 6 years. He had no signature policy wins, nothing that was signed into law, and they even denied him, seating a Supreme Court justice, right? They said, oh, you can't do that in an election year. And so I look at these people and I say to them, Obama was probably one of the most middle of the road, middling, he was not far left wing. He was not, he was like just in the middle. He was concerned with keeping the car on the road and trying to do right for the most people that he possibly could, not pandering to a small little base. And he was politically kneecapped, so he couldn't do anything major. The Republican Party made sure of that, and they gloated in that. So if you have a guy whose one policy achievement was a Republican plan originally, and then was kneecapped politically from doing anything else crazy during his term, nor was that his character, nor was that his inclination anyway, just a very middle-of-the-road guy, then what were you really upset about besides the fact the guy was black? And then on top of it, he's not even full black. He's half white. He's a mulatto. I don't even know if that's an acceptable term nowadays, and I apologize if it isn't. His mom was white, so you can't even be happy with a half-black man being president? That underscores how right-wing people are racist, at least as it pertains to Obama. And I tell people that, and their jaw is just on the ground. They know I'm right. They know I'm fucking right. They know. But they don't want to admit it because most of the people that are, extremely hateful in their speech are all doing it behind a keyboard, anonymously, like the chicken shits that they are. And so I'm going to sit here and, I'm sure I might catch a little flack for this, maybe, I don't know. I do have some other ideas about, kind of different kinds of discrimination happening in society that I feel the pressures of, specifically as it pertains to my non-existent job search and how that's not going very well. But I will not sit here as a white male, as a privileged white male, and, say I'm getting screwed or whatever. It's just the way that it is. That's the way society is going. It's inevitable. And so you can either, adapt, or you can, turn into some far right-wing zealot and vote for Trump. And that's why I would never vote for Trump. That's why I don't agree with his policies. That's why I don't agree with the people that are his voters, and which is why I struggle so much with not just the people who vote for him, but the Christian people who vote for them, because they're betraying their own religious beliefs. I guess I don't fault them because I understand the mindset, but it doesn't make it right. So I'm going to rewatch this video before I post it. Maybe I'd be surprised if it actually goes up. But this is the kind of content that's getting engagement, whether I like it or not. So since it doesn't look like I'm going to ever get a job again, I might as well try to, have some kind of a platform where I can speak my mind. And I hope that, there are people that see this. I hope that there are people that it, spurs some kind of discussion. Maybe not on the stupid message board underneath the video, but in your own, familial or friendship circles. Okay? I hope everybody's having a good day, and I will talk to you soon.